Amid a harsh, desolate forest where only the strong can survive, two tiny souls crossed paths in the most unexpected way. Ash, a lone wolf pup, wandered through the wilderness, weakened by hunger and gripped by fear. Not far away, beneath the tangled roots of fallen trees, lay Luna, a young bobcat kitten abandoned after a violent storm. By the laws of nature, they should have been enemies, never meant to stand side by side. Yet fate had written a different story. Surrounded by danger and isolation, Ash and Luna slowly formed a strange and powerful bond, one that defied predatory instinct and innate fear. What compelled two opposing species to choose trust over survival? And could such a fragile friendship endure within the unforgiving world of the wild? Before we begin, please hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss any new stories. Hook. Abandoned, burned, and on the brink of death. How did two apex predators end up so utterly broken? The world was a symphony of agony for Asher, the tiny wolf pup. Each shallow breath was a rasp, a fragile protest against the suffocating reality of the scrapyard. The metallic tang of rust and the acrid bite of spilled oil filled his nostrils, a permanent marker of his suffering. His small body, once sleek with puppy fat, was now a skeletal testament to starvation, every bone a sharp ridge beneath his matted, greasy fur. He lay sprawled amidst jagged heaps of twisted metal and discarded tires, a forgotten shadow in a landscape of human refuse. The sun, when it broke through the perpetual haze, felt like a cruel oven, baking the fever that raged within him, turning his whimpers into barely audible sighs. His eyes, clouded with pain and exhaustion, registered only blurry shapes and the oppressive weight of the world closing in. A deep, instinctual terror, etched into his very being, warned him away from the massive, noisy creatures that occasionally lumbered past, their shadows monstrous against the sharp-edged detritus. He had learned, through bitter experience, that their presence meant only pain, neglect, or the agonizing emptiness of hunger. He just wanted the biting cold inside him to stop, the burning outside him to fade. Miles away in the skeleton of a derelict factory, Lyra, the lynx kitten, knew a different kind of hell. The air still carried the faint, metallic scent of char and ash, a constant reminder of the inferno that had consumed her world. Her small, lithe body, meant for silent hunting and graceful leaps, was a map of suffering. Angry red burns crisscrossed her delicate paws, marred the soft fur of her belly, and puckered painfully around her ears. Each movement was a fresh torment, sending jolts of searing agony through her. She was hidden beneath a broken concrete slab, a dark, dusty alcove that offered little solace but immense concealment. Her spirit, once bright and curious, was now a shattered mosaic of fear and loss. The phantom cries of her family still echoed in her memory, a mournful dirge for what was gone. The immense, looming shadows of the factory's ruins seemed to press down on her, an external manifestation of the crushing despair within. She, too, recognized the scent of humans, a scent that now triggered a visceral, paralyzing terror. Their footsteps, when they occasionally rumbled through the factory, were the harbingers of unspeakable grief, of fire and abandonment. She cowered, pressing herself further into the gritty dust, her small heart a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. A new scent, unfamiliar and insistent, pierced Asher's haze. It was a strange mix of clean antiseptic chemicals and something else, a faint sweetness like something edible, but also a looming, vast presence. A shadow fell over him, larger than any before, and he instinctively tried to burrow deeper into the sharp metal, a futile effort. A warm, immense hand, gloved and smelling of something strange but not threatening, gently scooped him up. Panic, sharp and electrifying, shot through his emaciated frame. He squirmed, a weak, desperate wriggle, whimpering as the movement sent fresh stabs of pain through his feverish body. The giant's touch was firm, yet surprisingly soft, a confusing paradox. He was lifted, cradled against a warm, moving surface, and the world tilted. His stomach, a hollow cavern of hunger, lurched. He could hear soft murmurs, low and melodic, not harsh or angry. It was disorienting, terrifying, yet, strangely, for a fleeting moment, the immense cold inside him seemed to recede just a fraction. Lyra's sanctuary was breached, a new, unsettling human scent, different from the terrifying char of the fire, began to permeate her hiding place. It was softer, gentler, but still a human smell, and her heart hammered against her burned ribs. A beam of light, sudden and intrusive, stabbed into her dark refuge, illuminating her scarred body. She pressed herself tighter against the cold concrete, a tiny trembling ball of fur and fear. Then a voice, low and murmuring, reached her. It wasn't the angry shouts or panicked cries she remembered, but a soothing, almost melodic sound. A large hand, gloved and slow-moving, came into view, and for a terrifying second, all her instincts screamed, "Flee!" But there was no escape. The hand paused, not grabbing, not hurting, but simply offering something small and soft. A faint, meaty smell wafting towards her. It was a conflict, the deep, primal fear warring with an equally primal hunger that clawed at her insides. Her stomach clenched, her vision blurred, not just from the dimness, but from the exhaustion that weighed on her. The journey was a blur for Asher. He was in a confined space, jostled gently. The soft murmurs continued, a constant, low thrum against his ears. He felt a different kind of touch now, not the rough shoves of the scrapyard, but precise, probing movements. There was a sharp, brief sting on his leg, and he cried out, a small, pained yelp, but it was quickly followed by a strange, sleepy warmth spreading through him. His body felt heavy, his mind fogged, but the incessant burning inside him began to lessen. He was wrapped in something impossibly soft and warm, a sensation utterly alien to his life of cold, hard metal. He drifted half-conscious, vaguely aware of a rhythmic drip, drip, drip nearby, in a persistent, gentle breath against his own matted fur. The fear was still there, a coiled serpent in his gut, but it was muted, softened by the unfamiliar warmth and the strange, quiet comfort. Lyra, too, was transported. The dark had given way to a strange, bright place, filled with new, confusing smells. She was placed on a soft, yielding surface, completely unlike the harsh concrete or cold ground she knew. Giant faces, close and overwhelming, peered at her. Their voices were soft, but their presence was enormous, terrifying. They touched her, those large, careful hands, moving over her burned fur, cleaning the raw wounds with a cool, stinging liquid that made her hiss and twist, her small body arching in protest. But they didn't stop. They didn't hurt her, not like the fire had, but it was still an invasion, a violation of her shattered boundaries. Then a different kind of sting, a needle pricking her flesh, followed by a wave of drowsiness that pulled her down into a swirling, hazy darkness. She fought it, every instinct screaming defiance, but the exhaustion was too profound. As she slipped away, she felt a soft and cool balm being applied to her burns, an unfamiliar sensation that was both pain and a strange, nascent relief. When Asher awoke, the world felt different. The fever had receded, leaving him weak but clear-headed. He was still wrapped in the soft blanket, and a bowl of fresh, clean water sat beside him, reflecting the soft glow of a nearby lamp. His throat was raw, parched from days of neglect, and the sight of the water was an irresistible lure. He tentatively stretched, his muscles stiff and protesting, but the agonizing cold was gone. He drank, long and slow, the cool liquid a balm to his burning throat, the taste of clean water a revelation. He was in a large, quiet space, a kennel with soft bedding, not the sharp edges of the scrapyard. The giants were still around, their scent a constant presence, but they moved with a quiet reverence, their voices hushed. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath his renewed senses, but it was no longer a paralyzing shriek. He remembered the feeling of being lifted, the initial terror, the strange warmth, the brief sting followed by a hazy comfort. He was alive. He was still scared, but he was alive. Lyra's burns throbbed, a dull ache now instead of a searing agony. She, too, awoke to a softer reality. The harsh, burning sensations that had plagued her were muted, replaced by a strange, cool tightness where the medicine had been applied. She was on a soft bed, her body wrapped in clean, gentle warmth. A faint, savory smell, enticingly unfamiliar, tickled her nose. She blinked her large green eyes, no longer wide with terror, but with a cautious curiosity. A small dish of something that smelled like meat sat nearby. It was overwhelming, this sudden influx of gentle care after such desolation. But the fear of the giants, though lessened by the soothing sleep and the fading pain, remained a deep, primal scar. Asher's breathing, though no longer a frantic gasp, was dangerously shallow, a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. And Lyra's burns, despite the initial treatment, now showed angry red streaks, signs of a severe infection taking hold, threatening to consume her fragile life entirely. Without further immediate intervention, their desperate journeys, against all odds, would inevitably conclude in despair. Can a hope nursery truly save these rivals? Or is it a fool's errand born of a vet's radical decision? Asher, the tiny gray wolf pup, felt the world lurch and tilt. A giant hand, smelling of antiseptic and something faintly metallic, had scooped him from the cold, damp earth. Fear, a primal, ice-cold dread, gripped him. His mother was gone, her scent a fading memory, replaced by the crushing weight of loneliness and an aching emptiness in his belly. Now, this new terror, a confined space, a loud rumble and the constant jarring movement. He whimpered a small lost sound and tried to burrow deeper into the scratchy blanket beneath him. But there was nowhere to hide from the metallic clang of the enclosure or the persistent, unfamiliar smells. Then the rumbling stopped. The giants were talking in hushed, urgent tones. A new scent, sharper, more clinical, filled the air. A door opened, letting in a blinding, artificial light. Asher instinctively recoiled, his small body tensing. He was lifted again. A different giant now, gentler, but still terrifying. This giant, with soft hands and a calming murmur, placed him onto a cool, smooth surface. A dizzying array of objects surrounded him. Gleaming metal, strange fabrics, and the overwhelming, sterile scent that made his nose sting. He felt a gentle pressure on his leg, a quick, sharp pinch, then a sudden warmth spreading through him, chasing away some of the cold fear. A soft blanket, smelling faintly of clean linen, was tucked around him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the overwhelming pain in his belly receded slightly. Across the narrow partition space, Lyra, the lynx kitten, was experiencing her own terrifying ordeal. She had woken up to a world of jarring noise and strange smells after the blur of a frantic, desperate escape. The large, shadowy figure that had cornered her near the rusted trap had been imposing, but its touch was surprisingly gentle, even as it secured her. Now she was in a different prison, a soft carrier, the mesh grating offering glimpses of fleeting, blurry shapes. Her ears, disproportionately large for her small head, swiveled, or trying to make sense of the cacophony. Every instinct screamed danger. She pressed herself against the back of the carrier, her tiny claws digging into the soft material, her heart thumping like a drum. She felt the movement stop. A giant hand reached in, and Lyra hissed, a tiny, defiant sound, but it was useless. She was lifted, her limbs dangling for a terrifying moment before being placed on a cool, hard surface. The light here was bright, almost painful, and the smell was the same sterile scent Asher was experiencing. A gentle voice, belonging to the giant, murmured soothing words she didn't understand. But the tone was undeniably soft. A gentle brush, then a slight sting near her neck, followed by a wave of unexpected calm. It was a strange, confusing sensation. A fear still lingered, but it was muted, softened by an alien warmth spreading through her small body. She was then lowered into a deep, soft bed, the material smelling fresh and clean. Her throat was parched, her tongue thick with thirst. A small bowl of clear, cool water was placed near her nose. Hesitantly, she lapped, the sensation of the liquid on her tongue a profound relief after days of arid suffering. The giant, Elena, moved between them, her presence a constant, reassuring hum. Asher felt a soft touch, a scratch behind his ears, and a strange, purring sound escaped his throat, a sound he didn't even know he could make. He watched her, his cloudy eyes slowly clearing, her movements careful, almost deferential. She was a giant, yes, but not a threat. She smelled of earth and something sweet, not just the sharp clinic smell. She placed a soft, squeaky toy near him, then a small bowl of something warm and meaty. His hunger, a gnawing beast, made him tentatively approach. The taste was heavenly, rich and sustaining, unlike anything he'd had before. He ate slowly, guarding his meal, but no one tried to take it. Professor Davies' voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the quiet hum of the nursery, startling both pups. "Elena, you cannot be serious. Adjacent enclosures for a wolf and a lynx? This is an unprecedented, reckless decision. Do you have any idea what you're risking?" Asher flinched, his ears flattening, the sound reminding him of the angry snarls he'd heard in his brief, brutal past. He instinctively glanced at Lyra's enclosure, separated by a thick mesh partition. Lyra, too, had stiffened, her ears swiveling towards the loud, unfamiliar voice. She crouched low, a tiny predator, suddenly on high alert. The giant Elena, however, stood her ground, her voice calmer but firm. "Professor, with all due respect, their isolation trauma is severe. Proximity, even with barriers, can offer a sense of shared presence. It's a risk, yes, but one I believe is necessary for their psychological rehabilitation." "Psychological rehabilitation?" Davies scoffed, his voice escalating. "This isn't a social experiment, Elena. This is a rescue center, and you are jeopardizing not only their well-being, but your license. I will not stand by and watch you make such a fundamental error in judgment. I'm giving you 24 hours to reevaluate this arrangement, or I will be reporting you to the State Veterinary Board." The threat hung in the air, a cold, bitter promise. Elena simply watched him leave, her expression unreadable, before turning back to her charges, her hand resting briefly on the mesh partition between them. The giant's conflict was a confusing, unsettling thing, but Asher, for the first time, felt a flicker of something beyond fear, a faint, nascent curiosity towards the small, spotted creature just beyond the barrier, who seemed as bewildered by the world as he was. Their first meeting wasn't cute, not by a long shot. It was a terrifying, bloody fight for survival, a blur of teeth and claws in the suffocating dark of a small, grimy enclosure. A low, guttural snarl had erupted from the shadowed corner, a sound that prickled Asher, the wolf cub's young fur, making him recoil, muscles tensing. Then a flash of calico, a streak of wild anger, and a sharp, tearing pain in his ear. He'd yelped, a sound too high-pitched for a predator, but the fear was raw, instinctual. He'd retaliated with a clumsy snap, a blur against the other, smaller creature. The air had been thick with the metallic tang of blood and the sharp scent of terror. Two tiny, broken things trapped together, each seeing the other as just another threat in a world suddenly overflowing with them. The days that followed were a blur of overwhelming sensations. The pervasive smell of disinfectant that stung Asher's nose, and overpowering the familiar sense of dirt and pine, the clanking of metal, the murmur of large, soft voices, and the dizzying sensation of being lifted, examined by huge, gentle hands. His ear, where the other creature had struck him, throbbed. A thick, gooey substance had been applied. Then something that stung like 100 tiny needles before a soft, cool bandage was wrapped around it. The relief that followed was subtle but profound. The constant ache lessened, replaced by a dull pressure. He whined incessantly, a high, reedy sound of protest that grated even on his own ears, echoing off the unfamiliar walls of his new individual enclosure. He rejected the mushy, strange-smelling food they offered, turning his nose up at it, his stomach churning with anxiety. He paced the perimeter, a nervous energy thrumming through his small frame. then began to dig frantically at the thin, cold floor, his tiny claws scraping against the metal, a primal urge to escape, to burrow to safety. His wild heart yearned for the familiar earth beneath his paws, the rustle of leaves, the scent of a distant deer. This sterile box, this endless noise, it was all wrong. It was a trap. Lyra, in her own separate cage just across the narrow aisle, was a different kind of terror. Hers was a silent, coiled fury, ready to spring. She pressed herself into the furthest corner, a small, vibrant ball of fear and aggression, her calico fur a camouflage against the sterile backdrop. Every approach, every rustle of clothing, every soft, murmuring voice sent a tremor through her, her ears finely tuned to the slightest snap of a twig in the wild. Now registered every creak of the floor, every distant clatter, amplifying them into thunderous threats. She hissed, a dry, rasping sound, at anyone who dared to come too close, her small, sharp claws swiping blindly through the air. The humans, these enormous, soft-footed giants, loomed over her, their shadows vast and suffocating. They spoke in the soothing tones, but their hands, though slow and deliberate, still felt like a looming threat. She remembered the rough hands that had seized her from her den, the jarring movement, the suffocating darkness of a bag. These new hands, though different, still represented a loss of control, a violation of her very being. The unfamiliar food tasted like ash in her mouth, her stomach knotting with a fear so profound it extinguished all hunger. The two cubs maintained a wary distance, even from their separate enclosures. Asher the wolf cub would occasionally lift his head from his frantic digging, his golden eyes sweeping across the room until they landed on the other cage. Lyra the bobcat cub, ever watchful, would freeze, her small pointed ears swiveling to catch the almost imperceptible sound of his movements. Their gazes, when they met, were filled with suspicion, a primal, instinctual defense. Each saw the other not as a fellow victim, but as a competitor, a potential threat in this strange, unpredictable environment. The faint scent of the other animal carried on the circulating air was a constant reminder of the prior encounter, a fresh sting of fear. Elena approached Lyra's cage, her movements slow, deliberate, her voice a low, soothing murmur. She placed a small dish of water just inside the bars, hoping to entice the terrified cub to drink. Lyra watched her, every muscle taut, a tiny, vibrating bundle of pure adrenaline. As Elena's gloved hand moved to retract, Lyra saw her chance. A blur of calico, a lightning-fast lunge, and then a searing pain erupted on Elena's forearm. Lyra had lashed out, her claws, sharp as obsidian, raking deeply across the skin. Elena gasped, recoiling instantly, her hand flying to her arm. A thin line of crimson bloomed against her skin, a stark, visceral reminder of the wildness she was trying to tame. She looked at Lyra, who had immediately retreated back into her corner, bristling, her eyes wide and unblinking, the terror in them almost overwhelming. Elena knew it wasn't malice. It was pure, unadulterated fear. But the scratch was deep, a visceral tearing, a wound that would need more than a bandage. The sting in Elena's arm turned into a persistent throb, a pulsing reminder of Lyra's raw panic. Later, in the fluorescent glare of the clinic, the doctor's needle pierced her skin, drawing the edges of the wound together with neat, precise stitches. Each tug of the thread, each sharp, brief pain, felt like a judgment. Professor Davis stood beside her, a formidable presence, her gaze fixed not on Elena's face, but on the freshly sutured wound. "See, Elena?" Professor Davies' voice was low, but laced with an undeniable steel. "This is exactly what I mean. Proof. These are not pets. They are wild animals, untamed, dangerous. This experiment of yours, trying to rehabilitate them, trying to foster some kind of interspecies bond, it's reckless. It's putting everyone at risk. This is the moment to stop. Now, before someone gets truly hurt." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable, each stitch in Elena's arm a silent, undeniable testament to the professor's grim pronouncement. The wound on Elena's arm was more than just a physical injury. It was a symbol, a stark, painful piece of evidence in the escalating argument against hope. The world became a vast, echoing maw of nothingness. Asher, the young wolf pup, had known darkness, the kind that pressed in on him like the weight of the forest floor after his mother was gone. But this was different. This darkness was sudden, a snap devouring the thin, artificial light that usually hummed from the ceiling. A giant's low, rumbling voice had been speaking, then it too was gone, swallowed by the sudden silence. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his belly. He remembered the cracking thunder from his earliest days, the way it made the very ground shake, the way his mother would press him close, her warm body a shield. Now there was no shield, only the wire mesh of his enclosure, cold against his nose and the sudden booming crash outside. He whined, a small, pathetic sound. Then it swelled, ripped from his throat, a howl raw and untamed, a cry for a mother who would never answer, for a world that felt like it was tearing itself apart. The thunder crashed again, closer this time, and the building shuddered. He pressed himself against the back wall, a knot of pure terror. Then a sound, not thunder, not the giant's voice, a low rumble deep in the chest, a purr that vibrated through the air, surprisingly close. He stopped howling, ears swiveling, trying to pierce the gloom. From the other side of the mesh, a shape materialized, dark against the almost darker wall. Lyra, the young lynx. She was usually a blur of nervous energy, all twitching ears and wary eyes. Her lynx tufts standing erect, a creature of proud, solitary watchfulness. But now she was different. Her shape was hunched, her head low. He heard a soft sniff, then felt the barest brush of something cold and wet against the mesh where his own nose pressed. A nose. Lyra's nose. She wasn't snarling, wasn't spitting. She was touching him. Through the wire, a low, soft trill left her throat, almost a question. Instinctively, his tail gave a weak, almost imperceptible wag. Not alone. He was not alone in this terrifying, booming dark. A quiet click, then a soft hiss from a distant corner. A new light, small and red, bloomed into existence. Infrared. It painted the world in eerie shades, making the giants' faces appear ghostly, their movements slow and deliberate. Elena, one of the kind giants who smelled of warm blankets and soft food, was there. Her own face under the infrared glow seemed soft, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes wet. She watched them, her gaze intense, almost like she could hear the silent conversation between his wagging tail and Lyra's tentative purr. The rumble of the thunder continued, but it felt less menacing now, a distant growl instead of a direct threat. Elena moved, her large hands reaching for something on the table beside their enclosures, a soft, squeaky toy. She placed it carefully on the ground, then nudged it with a long stick until it rested against the mesh that separated them. Lyra watched it, ears perked, tail giving a slow, almost hypnotic twitch. Asher, though still wary, felt a flicker of curiosity. It was a game for them. Elena introduced another toy, a rolled-up cloth that smelled of something intriguing, a bit like forest, a bit like the giant's own gentle scent. She pushed it towards Lyra first, then Asher. Neither animal made a move for it, but they watched, their ears swiveling in sync, their bodies subtly relaxed. It was a slow dance, a silent negotiation of trust, woven into the fabric of the storm's embrace. The air, though electric with the storm, was also charged with something new, something fragile and hopeful. Then a flicker. A tiny shadow, quick and brown, darted across the floor, illuminated briefly by a sudden flash of lightning outside. Asher's head snapped up, his predatory instinct, so long suppressed by fear and hunger, sparking to life. Lyra stiffened, her lynx tufts suddenly rigid, her body coiled, a mouse, small, terrified, and very, very real. It squeaked, a high-pitched, desperate sound, as it tried to squeeze under a gap in the wall, directly between their two enclosures. This was different from a toy. This was prey. Asher felt the old hunger claw at him. the urge to chase, to snap. Lyra's body language mirrored his, a predator's focus, her tail beginning to twitch in that familiar pre-pounce rhythm. The giants, Elena and another one named Professor Davies, who always smelled of old books and gentle curiosity, gasped. They were expecting a fight. Asher could sense their anticipation, their held breath. It was the moment where instinct could override everything. But then, the mouse, in its desperate scramble, hit the far end of Asher's enclosure, unable to find a way out. It turned, panicked, and darted towards Lyra's side. Instead of lunging for it through the mesh, Asher, with an almost imperceptible shift of his weight, cut off its escape route back towards his side. The mouse was now trapped in a small pocket, cornered by Lyra's enclosure wall on one side, and Asher's strategic, silent blockage on the other. Lyra, seeing the mouse's new position, didn't try to snap at it. Instead, with a liquid grace, she brought her paw up, not to strike, but to gently tap the enclosure wall near the mouse, her clawless pad a soft thud against the metal. It startled the tiny creature, making it freeze, trembling. Asher, in turn, nudged a loose piece of gravel on his side, sending it skittering towards the mouse, further cementing its paralysis. They weren't fighting over it. They were working together. Professor Davies let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His voice, when it came, was a low murmur of pure astonishment. "Did you see that, Elena? They coordinated." Asher looked up, momentarily distracted from the mouse. He met Lyra's gaze through the mesh. There was no aggression, no fear, only a shared understanding. The storm raged outside. The thunder still boomed. But inside, in the dim, infrared glow, a new kind of quiet understanding had settled. They had been alone, hunted, terrified. Now, even with a common prey between them, they had found a way to not be. The metallic scent of the cage, the endless rocking of the transport, it had all been a blur of terror. Then, a needle's sharp sting, a brief, dizzying warmth, and the world went dark. When Asher, the wolf cub's eyes finally fluttered open, it was to a strange, soft world. No hard ground, no biting wind. Instead, a gentle give beneath his paws. A faint, clean smell he couldn't place. And in the distant murmur of voices that no longer sounded like angry snarls or the ominous snapping of traps. The pain in his leg, a dull throb, was still there, but muted like a memory of a bad dream rather than a present reality. He was tired, so tired, but the gnawing hunger had lessened, replaced by a strange, contented fullness. He barely noticed the enormous, blurry shapes that moved around him, only registering the soft touch of something warm being placed beside him, the clean taste of water in a shallow dish. It was a new kind of fear, this unfamiliar gentleness, a fear that whispered, "What's the catch?" Lyra, the lynx cub, too, had known only the sharp edges of a short, brutal life, the sudden grab, the terrifying darkness of the sack, the overwhelming stench of humans and their strange metallic conveyances. She remembered the jostling, the dizzying fear, the cold press of metal. But then a soft voice, a gentle hand, in the blessed relief of water, clean water. Not the muddy, stagnant puddles she'd learned to lap from. Her fur, once plastered with mud and burrs, felt lighter, almost fluffy. The ache in her belly, a constant companion, had finally receded. She was wary, every muscle tensed for the inevitable betrayal, but there was no harshness, no sudden pain, just a persistent, quiet presence, and the soft whisper of fabrics. The towering shapes of the humans moved with a surprising slowness, their voices low and melodic, not the guttural barks of threat she was used to. It was all so disorienting. She missed the sharp, wild sense of the forest, the familiar rustle of leaves, but a primal part of her knew this was better, safer, even if her instincts screamed otherwise. The storm had raged for hours, a relentless drumming against the sanctuary's sturdy walls. It was the kind of deluge that made even the most secure animal twitchy. A low hum of unease vibrating through the shared recovery space. Asher, restless, had been pacing his side of the enclosure, the soft padding of his bandaged paw barely audible over the wind's howl. Lyra, usually a master of stillness, was twitching her ear tufts, her keen senses overwhelmed by the deluge. A particularly violent gust rattled the window panes, and a small, terrified squeak cut through the din. A rogue mouse, seeking shelter from the downpour, had found its way into their shared space. It was a tiny, quivering thing, its whiskers twitching frantically. For a heartbeat, both cubs froze. Then instinct, ancient and primal, surged. Asher, low to the ground, began to stalk, a silent shadow. His good leg moved with a predatory grace, his amber eyes locked onto the minuscule form. Across the partition, Lyra mirrored his movements. Her powerful hind legs tensed, her tail twitched, a silent signal of imminent attack. But then, something astonishing happened. As the mouse darted left, Asher moved to cut off its escape. Lyra, instead of moving to intercept him, shifted with him, creating a pincer movement. The mouse, frantic, reversed direction, only to find Lyra positioned to block its path. It was an instinctual dance, a bizarre, unplanned choreography of predators. Asher nudged it subtly with his nose, guiding it gently toward the corner. Lyra, with a surprising lack of aggression, used her paw to tap the ground, creating a soft thud that steered the mouse away from a perilous gap in the wall. There was no growl, no hiss, no challenge, only a shared, silent focus. Professor Davies, watching from the observation room, his clipboard poised, lowered it slowly, his jaw slack. He'd seen wolves and lynx, wild and captive. Their inherent antagonism was legendary. This was something else entirely. For weeks, the professor had been documenting his skepticism, a thick lens through which he viewed Elena's animal whisperer methods. He charted their initial lethargy, their refusal to eat, their withdrawal. He'd scoffed at Elena's insistence that their trauma was emotional as much as physical, muttering about anthropomorphism and romanticizing wild animals. But now he scribbled furiously, his old hands surprisingly steady. Cooperative hunting instinct, shared focus without aggression, reduced stress response to novel stimuli, mouse. The data, once a testament to their deep-seated trauma, was beginning to shift, a faint, almost imperceptible upwards curve in their mental health markers. He wouldn't admit it to Elna, not yet, but the sight of them, these two disparate, traumatized creatures working together to hurt a tiny mouse, had lodged itself deep in his scientific brain. It defied every behavioral paradigm he knew. It hinted at a recovery far more profound than he'd ever dared to hope for. A silent, secret shift was happening within the walls of the sanctuary, and within the very core of Professor Davis's rigid scientific heart. The world had been a blur of terrifying giants and dizzying motion. Asher, the wolf cub, remembered the cold, the biting ache in his small paws, and the gnawing emptiness in his belly. Then came the sudden confinement, the confusing rush of new smells, antiseptic and something else. Something warm and sweet, like dried leaves after rain. He'd whimpered, a thin, reedy sound deep in his throat, and pressed himself against the rough metal of the carrier. Every bump was a jolt of fear, every shadow a potential predator. Lyra, the lynx cub, had been a similar bundle of trembling fur, her usually keen senses overwhelmed by the jarring sounds and foreign scents. The scent of fear, sharp and acrid, had been strong on both of them, a primal warning system screaming danger. But then, a new scent had emerged, faint at first, then stronger. Human. Not the harsh, aggressive human scent of the past, but something softer, accompanied by a soothing, low rumble of sound. The first touch had been a shock, a sudden pressure that made Asher flinch and snap. But it wasn't a grab, not a blow. It was a gentle stroke, repeated over his head, down his back. It felt strange, not bad. It was accompanied by that low rumble, a sound that vibrated through his small body, oddly calming. A soft cloth, smelling faintly of something clean and comforting, had wiped away the grime from his fur. He'd felt the sting of a tiny needle, a sharp pinch that made him yelp. But then a wave of warmth had spread through him, and the dull ache in his limbs seemed to recede. Lyra, ever the bolder of the two, had hissed initially, her tiny claws extended. But even she had succumbed to the gentle ministrations, her matted reddish-brown fur slowly being cleaned, the raw scratches on her flank carefully tended to. The giants, these enormous creatures, moved with surprising slowness around them, their voices soft, their hands careful. Food, soft and palatable, had appeared. Then clean water, tasting like a miracle after days of thirst. It was confusing, this sudden kindness after so much harshness. Trust was a concept foreign to their instincts. Yet something was shifting. News of the impossible pair, the wolf and the lynx, living in harmony at Elena's Hope Nursery, had spread like wildfire, not just through the local community, but beyond. It was a story that captivated, a testament to unexpected bonds. But not everyone saw it through the same lens. Ms. Thorne, a name whispered with a certain reverence and fear among animal rescue circles, entered the picture, a whirlwind of zealous conviction. For Lyra, Elena's presence had become the anchor in a world of confusing sensations. Elena's scent was comfort, her touch a promise of safety. But now another human scent, sharp and unfamiliar, had entered their sanctuary. A loud, insistent voice, devoid of the gentle tones Elena used, boomed through the building. The words were meaningless to Lyra, but the tone was clear, agitated, angry. Elena's own scent, usually calm and reassuring, had shifted, becoming tinged with a subtle anxiety that Lyra could detect. Her instincts screamed danger, even as her small body was safe within the confines of their warm, soft bed. Unnatural, the sharp, cutting human voice had declared, echoing through the walls. Asher had tensed, his hackles rising almost imperceptibly. He didn't understand the complex human sounds, but he understood the raw emotion behind them. This giant was angry, and her anger felt like a threat to the fragile peace they had found. He nudged Lyra, a silent communication, a shared instinct to prepare for danger. Mrs. Thorne had been unrelenting, her words like sharp stones thrown at the foundation of everything Elena had built. She called it abuse, a cruel manipulation of nature, threatening to revoke the Hope Nursery's license, to tear apart the sanctuary that had become a haven. For Asher, the thought of separation from Lyra was unimaginable. She was a constant, a warm, purring presence, a tiny, fierce guardian. She was family now, in a way he hadn't known was possible. Then another giant had stepped forward, Professor Davies. He was a familiar scent, not as warm as Elena's, but consistently calm, often carrying the scent of paper and something metallic. He observed them differently with quiet curiosity, his eyes often following their interactions. He had seen the way Asher would instinctively guard Lyra during their playful wrestling, with the way Lyra would rub her small head against Asher's neck, a gesture of pure affection. He had witnessed their progress, their fear slowly giving way to tentative trust, their wounds healing, their playful energy returning. He spoke in the same low, measured tones that Elena used, and though his words were incomprehensible, the shift in Elena's scent, from anxious to relieved, was palpable. Professor Davies, with his charts and his data, had become an unexpected shield, presenting scientific evidence of their improved psychological well-being, challenging Ms. Thorne's vehement accusations. The public hearing had been a crucible, a terrifying cacophony of human voices and unfamiliar scents. Ms. Thorne, her face a mask of grim determination, had presented images, not of Asher and Lyra, but of others. Images of raw, brutal nature, claws, teeth, blood, a silent, terrifying narrative of predation and struggle, of the harsh reality of the wild. It was a language Asher understood on a primal level, the instinct to survive, to fight, to flee. He felt the fear ripple through the room, a collective tremor among the giants. Ms. Thorne's voice, cold and unwavering, challenged Elena directly, demanding proof that love could truly overcome millennia of ingrained instinct. Could the soft touches, the gentle words, the shared warmth of their bed truly erase the imprinted code of predator and prey? Asher looked at Lyra, nestled beside him, her purr a gentle vibration against his side. He didn't have words, but he had a feeling of safety, of belonging, of a bond forged not in instinct, but in shared survival. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing he could somehow convey to these giants that the harsh images Ms. Thorne showed were a ghost from a past they were finally, painstakingly, leaving behind. The air in the quiet room, usually a comfort, now hummed with a tension Asher the wolf cub couldn't quite grasp. The familiar scent of Lyra, the bobcat kitten, was there, strong and reassuring, yet something felt wrong. He'd followed her through terrifying darkness, felt her small, fierce body pressed against his as they shivered, faced the giant human hands that had first stung with needles, then soothed with warmth and soft blankets. Their bond, forged in fear and tempered by shared healing, was a silent language, a constant presence. But today, a new kind of fear, cold and sharp, pricked at him. Could a wall, even one they could see through, truly separate what the storm had welded together? The scent was there, but the warmth, the soft nuzzle against his rough fur, the playful nip at his ear, these were missing. The day Elena brought the temporary solution was etched into Asher's raw, new memory of pain. He heard the strange scraping sounds, felt the vibrations through the floor, and saw the giants moving with an unfamiliar urgency. Then the familiar mesh, the one they had used to push their noses through, to bat at each other's tails, was gone. In its place, a tall, clear barrier rose, impossibly smooth and cold. He could see Lyra the bobcat kitten on the other side, her ears flattened, her tail twitching nervously. He tried to push his head through, to nuzzle her, but his nose met an invisible wall. He whined, a low, confused sound, and Lyra echoed him, a high-pitched, distressed cry that tore at something deep inside him. He pawed at it, his blunt claws scraping uselessly against the hard surface, desperate to breach the transparent barrier that now held them apart. Lyra mirrored his actions, her smaller paws beating a frantic rhythm against the glass. The air, usually thick with their combined scents, now felt thin, sterile. The first night was an agony of absence. Asher the wolf cub curled into a tight ball, his nose pressed against the floor, where Lyra the bobcat kitten's scent lingered most strongly. He could still see her, a small, sad shape on her side of the glass. But the warmth was gone. The reassuring rumble of her purr, the soft weight of her body against his, all replaced by a cold, impenetrable emptiness. He tasted the clean water, but it felt like dust. The new soft kibble, a recent luxury after days of hunger and the bland gruel of recovery, lay untouched. His stomach, usually quick to respond to the promise of food, now churned with a different kind of hunger, a yearning for presence. He whined, a low, lonely sound, and heard a similar plaintive cry from the other side of the glass. The giants, Elena and her team, moved around them with quiet sadness, their faces etched with concern, their gentle voices now sounding like distant, sorrowful whispers. He understood instinctively that this separation was their doing, but he couldn't comprehend why they would inflict such a terrible hurt after all the kindness. Days bled into a blur of numb confusion for Lyra the bobcat kitten. The familiar sting of the needle, a pain that used to precede the comforting warmth, now just felt like another invasion. The giants, those towering, gentle creatures who had brought her back from the brink of starving and pain, now seemed capable of inflicting a different kind of suffering. The glass wall was a cruel trick. She could see Asher the wolf cub, his sad eyes mirroring her own despair, but she couldn't reach him. Her tiny stomach, which had gratefully accepted every morsel of food since her rescue, now churned with nausea. The soft, rich scent of the special wet food, usually irresistible, turned her away. Each mouthful felt like ash, a betrayal of the emptiness that now gnawed at her. She whined a weak, reedy sound, her throat aching with the effort. Her body felt heavy, her breathing shallow, each inhale a struggle. The warmth of the blankets no longer brought comfort, only a dull ache. She felt a tickle in her chest, a strange, rasping sensation that made her cough, a wet rattling sound that startled even her. Elena's scent, usually a calming presence, now carried an edge of urgency, of deep worry. Lyra the bobcat kitten heard the hushed conversations, the quick movements, felt the giant hands probing her small body with a new intensity. The air grew thick with unfamiliar scents, sharp, medicinal, yet still mixed with Elena's familiar, comforting smell. The strange coughing in her chest worsened, making her small body heave. One giant, a different one, held a strange whirring device near her, and a cool mist tickled her nose, making her sneeze. She was tired, so very tired, and the strength that had seen her through the cold nights and the pangs of hunger seemed to have deserted her. Even Asher the wolf cub's plaintive whines from the other side of the glass, usually a source of shared sorrow, now just contributed to her overwhelming exhaustion. She wanted to sleep, to hide from the cold, the cough, the crushing weight of separation, but her body wouldn't let her. She felt a prick, a tiny sting, and then a profound wave of weariness washed over her, pulling her down into a fitful, shallow sleep. The gnawing emptiness had been replaced by a different kind of ache, a dull throb in Lishra, the lynx cub's small chest that wasn't hunger, but something far more confusing. Her world, once a cacophony of smells and sounds, had shrunk to the sterile hum of the sanctuary, broken only by the rhythmic purr of Asher the wolf cub on the other side of an invisible wall. He was there, always there, a comforting blur of gray fur and playful energy, but always just out of reach. The memory of touch, of warm fur pressing against hers, was a ghost that haunted her waking hours, an ache that no amount of food or soft blankets could truly soothe. The giant human, Elena, with her soft voice and gentle hands, had introduced a new game, a strange two-sided dance. Lyra would crouch low, her muscles tensed, watching Asher the wolf cub pace along the other side of the clear barrier. When he sprinted, a flash of gray blurring past, Lyra would launch herself forward, a silent chase, paws thudding against the firm ground. She couldn't feel his fur, couldn't nip at his scruff, but the thrill of the pursuit was still there, a whisper of their old wild games. Sometimes Asher the wolf cub would press his broad, wet nose against the clear wall, and Lyra the lynx cub would respond, her own small face pressing against the cool surface. A phantom caress. It wasn't the same, it was never the same, but it was something. Weeks bled into months. The initial sickness, the deep fatigue that had settled into Lyra's bones, had slowly receded, replaced by a restless energy. The sting of the needle, a sharp, momentary pain that had always preceded a wave of comforting drowsiness, was now a familiar annoyance, quickly forgotten when the giant human offered a tasty morsel or a new, intriguing toy. The strange clear wall that separated her from Asher the wolf cub was no longer a terrifying mystery, but a part of their new existence, a peculiar extension of their world. Elena, the giant with the kind eyes, had added another element to their strange play. A soft, squishy ball, impossibly light, would appear, placed by those gentle hands right at the seam where the two clear panels met. Lyra would bat at it, her tiny claws retracted, sending it rolling a few inches. Then, with a soft thump that vibrated through the floor, Asher the wolf cub would nudge it back with his nose or a playful paw. A slow, silent game of invisible tetherball. Each interaction a fragile bridge built across the divide. These small, shared moments were like drops of clean, cool water after days of thirst. Not enough to fully quench, but enough to remind her that relief was possible. Joy, a fleeting, almost forgotten sensation, would sometimes bubble up, a warmth in her chest that rivaled the sun. Asher the wolf cub, too, had adapted. The terror of being scooped from the dark, cold confines of his old life, the constant fear of a sharp blow or an empty belly, had slowly faded into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of regular meals and soft bedding. The scent of Elena, a comforting mix of disinfectant and something uniquely human, was now associated with safety, with the gentle scratch behind his ears, and the sound of her soft voice, even if he didn't understand the words. The glass wall, initially a source of confusion and frustration, had become a canvas for his brother's antics. Lyra's playful charges along her side of the partition mirrored his own frustrated urges to chase, to wrestle, to tumble. He would run, full out, a blur of gray, knowing that somewhere on the other side, Lyra the lynx cub was matching his pace. Their shared energy, a silent hum in the air. The ball game was a particular favorite. He would see Lyra the lynx cub's tiny paw strike it, a delicate tap, and then it would be his turn. A gentle nudge with his nose, sometimes a clumsy swipe with his paw, sending it back to her. It was a shared secret, a game only they understood, a testament to a bond that refused to be broken, even by something so cold and unyielding as glass. The frustration still simmered, a low growl in his chest when he wanted to truly connect, to feel her warmth, but the small bursts of joy, the shared moments of playful interaction, were enough to keep the darkness at bay. It was a fragile truce with reality, but a truce nonetheless. During one of the giant human's routine checks, a confusing, slightly painful interruption in the daily rhythm of play and rest, Lyra felt a firm but gentle hand probe her front right paw. A tiny, almost insignificant sting pulsed from the soft pad. She'd barely noticed it before, a dull ache that sometimes flared after an enthusiastic chase along the glass. But the giant human, Elena, made soft, concerned noises, her brow furrowed in a way that usually meant something was amiss. The smell of antiseptic, a familiar scent now, became stronger as Elena carefully examined her paw. It was then, while the giant human's eyes were fixed on her, that Lyra registered the faint, persistent throb. It was a small injury, a slight abrasion from countless playful swipes against the unyielding barrier, a casualty of her enduring, albeit frustrated, desire to connect with Asher. Later, a new strange layer appeared on the glass, a clear, smooth film that changed the feel of her paw against it, making her playful swatting less jarring. It was an adaptation, another strange new rule in their shared existence, a silent acknowledgement from the giant human that even in their separated world, their bond was real enough to cause harm and real enough to warrant protection. The game continued, but now a soft gave met her paws, a subtle cushioning that made the playful swipes against the barrier less painful. A testament to Elena's constant vigilance, her unspoken promise of care, and the enduring, unbreakable spirit of two cubs determined to find joy in the echoes of a bond. From scrapyard pup to rescue hero, Asher's transformation will amaze you. Years had unfurled like the changing seasons, each one etching new strength and wisdom onto Asher. The spindly, frightened pup who'd once cowered in the stench of neglect was now a magnificent wolf, a creature of sinew and intelligence. His coat a rich tapestry of grays and blacks, gleaming with health. His body, once marred by hunger and fear, now pulsed with a quiet power, honed through relentless training. He was a professional, a specialist in the most harrowing of tasks, search and rescue. The giants, initially so confusing and overwhelming, had become his partners, their complex scents and sounds now a language he understood. Elena, the giantess with the gentle hands and the soft voice, remained the center of his world, her touch a constant reassurance. He worked often with other giants, those in stiff, dark uniforms who carried strange, noisy objects and smelled of seriousness, the local police. His past, a jagged scar on his memory, fueled an empathy that made him exceptional. He remembered the cold, the gnawing emptiness, the bone-deep fear of being utterly lost. This echo of his own suffering made the distress signals of lost humans resonate deeper within him, guiding him with an uncanny precision to those who needed him most. He still lived in his carefully designed, expansive enclosure adjacent to Lyra's, their unique bond a silent, comforting presence in his daily life. The scent of panic, thin and ragged, clung to the biting wind. It was different from the sharp, metallic tang of fear Asher had known in his pup days, a more diffuse, desperate scent that permeated the frigid air. A smaller giant was lost. Elena's voice, usually a soothing balm, held an edge of urgency, her hands moving with a practiced speed as she prepared him. The harness, once a strange restriction, now felt like a second skin, a signal for work. He felt the cold sting of the blizzard's icy needles against his nose, the soft crunch of deep snow beneath his paws, each step a testament to his strength. The world was a blur of white, the air thick with frozen breath and the muffled sounds of distant giants shouting. He inhaled, sifting through the cacophony of scents. Pine, snow, the nervous scent of other giants, and underneath it all, that small, desperate human. He focused, letting instinct and training guide him, his powerful nose a compass in the whiteout. He remembered the feeling of being cold, so cold that his bones ached, and a shiver of ancient fear ran through him, propelling him onward. He would find this small giant. He would bring them back to the warmth. His paws, usually so nimble, broke through the crust of snow into surprising softness, a deeper scent. Not panic now, but something more primal. Fear mixed with resignation and the sweet, sickly scent of cold tears. He pushed through a drift, his body straining, and there, huddled beneath the gnarled roots of a snow-laden spruce, was the small giant. So tiny, so utterly still. Asher hesitated, remembering the confusion of his own early interactions with giants. They could be loud, unpredictable, sometimes even cruel. But Elena's voice, a ghost in his memory, reminded him of trust. He approached slowly, a low, comforting rumble in his chest, a sound he learned from Elena, meant to soothe. The small giant, wrapped in a bright, almost unnaturally red coat, stirred, its head lifting slowly. Two wide, terrified eyes, blue like the winter sky, met his. Asher lowered his head slightly, a gesture of peace. He nudged the small giant gently with his nose. A warm, furry touch against cold skin. "Move! Come with me!" The small giant was heavy, limbs stiff with cold, but Asher understood. He nudged again, then carefully, with the gentlest possible grip on the thick fabric of the red coat, began to pull. Not roughly, but with a steady, reassuring pressure. The small giant whimpered, a tiny sound of fear and exhaustion, but then miraculously started to move. One stiff leg, then the other, slowly, hesitantly. Asher kept his pace measured, his tail a low, slow pendulum, sending silent signals of encouragement. The scent of Elena and the other giants grew stronger, closer. The muted shouts began to sharpen into individual voices. Hope, a warm, unfamiliar sensation, bloomed in Asher's chest. He was not just surviving, he was helping others survive. This was the true meaning of his life now, a stark contrast to the emptiness of his past. The cold, once a harbinger of suffering, was now merely a challenging backdrop for his purpose. Then the relief, the overwhelming, joyous scent of Elena, mixed with the grateful cries of the other giants. Asher released his gentle hold, stepping back as Elena rushed forward, her face a mixture of relief and pride. She knelt, wrapping her arms around the small giant, murmuring words Asher didn't understand but felt in the vibrations of her chest. Then she turned to him, her hands, once the source of careful prodding and initial fear, now stroking his fur with deep, unwavering affection. Her scent filled him, a warm anchor in the chaos. He pressed against her, a silent conversation passing between them. This was it. This was why she had saved him, nursed him, trained him. This was the culmination of trust, the tangible proof that a scarred past could give way to a meaningful present. He looked at the small giant, now safely cradled, its blue eyes no longer wide with terror, but softened with dawning comprehension. Asher, the scrapyard pup, had truly become a guardian of hope. The burned kitten became a beacon of solace, Lyra's gift for healing. It was a strange, almost unbelievable turn of events for the small, scarred creature that had once known only the acrid smell of smoke and the searing pain of flame. Lyra, now a truly magnificent adult lynx, her tawny fur thick and soft despite the faint ghostly patterns of old burns visible in certain light, had grown into the beloved mascot of Hope Nursery, Her emerald eyes, once wide with terror, now held a deep, knowing calm. She moved with a silent grace, a living testament to resilience, her very presence a comfort. Humans, those towering, sometimes clumsy giants, had initially been sources of bewildering sensation. The sharp prick of a needle, the unfamiliar smell of strange cleansers, the tight squeeze of hands. But then came the soft blankets, the gentle strokes, the consistent offerings of warm, meaty food and cool, clean water. The sting of the medicine slowly faded, replaced by the deep, aching throb of healing, and then eventually by no pain at all. Lyra had learned, through endless repetition and the unwavering kindness of the giants, that their large hands, though initially terrifying, could also bring the deepest comfort. Their voices, though loud, could be incredibly soothing. She had a special role now, a purpose that resonated deep within her recovered spirit. She was specially trained to assist other traumatized wild animals, particularly smaller ones, in overcoming their fear and anxieties. Her gentle presence and calm demeanor provided an invaluable part of the healing process. Her own scars, visible if one looked closely, served as a quiet testament to her resilience and the power of recovery. The arrival of the fox cub had been different. Usually new arrivals came in crates, a cacophony of fear and growls and whimpers. This one, a tiny male red fox, had been brought in by the smallest giant, a young one whose scent Lyra knew well. The cub hadn't made a sound. It was wrapped in a rough cloth still. Lyra had watched from her perch, her instincts on high alert, but her training holding her steady. The giants had been quiet, their movements hushed. The air had been thick with a new, sharper kind of human sorrow. Later, Lyra had been brought to its enclosure. The cub, they called him Fenris, was tiny, no bigger than Lyra's paw. He huddled in a corner, a trembling lump of red fur, eyes wide and unfocused with terror. He smelled of fear, of something acrid and metallic that Lyra knew was bad, very bad. He would not eat, would not drink. He just trembled. Lyra remembered that feeling, that constant shaking fear that made even the softest touch feel like a blow. The giants had tried, oh, they had tried, soft voices, tempting smells. But Fenris remained a statue of pure dread. Lyra approached slowly, her large padded paws making no sound on the soft straw. She lay down a careful distance away, her body language calm, open. No direct gaze, no sudden movements. Just presence. She closed her eyes slowly, then opened them. A long, deliberate blink, a signal of peace. Fenris watched her, a tiny tremor running through his small frame. He was so broken, so utterly lost in the darkness of his past. Lyra remembered the searing pain, the confusion, the terrible, endless thirst. She remembered the giants, at first a new terror, then a slow, dawning realization that their touch, though strange, brought relief. Hours passed. Lyra remained. She stretched, yawned, groomed a paw. All normal, non-threatening lynx behaviors. Fenris remained unmoving, but Lyra felt a shift, subtle, almost imperceptible. His breathing, though still shallow, was less frantic. His eyes, though still wide, held a flicker of something new, something that wasn't pure terror. Curiosity, perhaps, or perhaps just an exhaustion so profound that even fear couldn't hold its absolute grip. The first breakthrough came when a giant brought food. Lyra rose, stretching languidly, and walked to her own bowl. She ate slowly, deliberately, the crunch of kibble a soothing sound in the quiet space. Fenris watched, his nose twitching almost imperceptibly at the smell of the food. Lyra looked at him, then back at her bowl, then back at Fenris. An invitation, unspoken. The giant placed a small bowl of soft, minced meat near Fenris, then retreated. Lyra nudged her own bowl, then lay down again, still watching. Fenris still didn't move, but Lyra knew. The scent of the food, the sight of a calm, large predator eating without threat, was slowly eroding the walls around him. Lyra had known that feeling too. The gnawing hunger after fear had paralyzed her, the overwhelming need to survive. It took days of Lyra's quiet presence, her steady breathing, her calm, green gaze, Days of the giants bringing food and water, speaking in soft, low tones. Days of Fenris slowly, tentatively, beginning to take sips of water. Then nibbles of food, always when Lyra was near, always when she projected that unwavering calm. One afternoon, Lyra awoke from a doze to feel a feather-light touch on her tail. She opened her eyes slowly. Fenris, emboldened by hunger and perhaps by something even deeper, something that recognized a kindred spirit, was nosing her tail. He jerked back when her eyes opened, but didn't flee. He just froze, trembling. Lyra, very slowly, very gently, extended a paw, not clawed, just soft fur, and nudged the small fox cub. A gentle coaxing, a silent promise. Her own scars served as a quiet testament to her resilience and the power of recovery, and in that moment, she offered her own recovered spirit as a beacon for his. Fenris, after a long, agonizing moment, leaned into her touch. The healing had begun. Every night, the wolf and the lynx shared a secret, a quiet communion that whispered of a bond-defying instinct in species. It was a secret born of fear and pain, then nurtured by gentle hands and a shared warmth that transcended the coldness of their past. Asher the wolf cub, a tiny bundle of matted gray fur and anxious whimpers, remembered the jarring bump, the suffocating darkness of the metal box. Panic had clawed at him, a primal terror that knotted his small stomach and made his teeth ache from trying to find something, anything to bite. Then came the sudden, blinding light, the giant shadows looming over him, and a sharp, stinging pain in his flank. His body convulsed, a frantic fight-or-flight response that quickly gave way to a hazy drowsiness. He recalled the metallic tang of something pushed into his mouth, then the dizzying warmth that spread through his limbs, dulling the sharp edges of his fear. The world spun, and he curled into himself, a pathetic, shivering mass. Lyra the lynx kitten, all oversized paws and tufted ears, had her own memory of chaos. The smell of smoke and fear, the desperate scramble, the cold, wet ground that clung to her tiny pads. She remembered the jarring sensation of being scooped up, not gently, but roughly, by something much bigger and stronger. The world had become a blur of dizzying heights and terrifying noises until she was dropped into a small, enclosed space. Hunger gnawed at her, a constant, sharp ache. And then came the unfamiliar scent, the touch that was both firm and surprisingly soft. A different stinging, like a bee, than the blessed, soothing warmth that enveloped her, easing the frantic pounding of her heart. The most vivid memory was the sweet, cool liquid that touched her parched tongue, a sensation of pure, unadulterated relief after days of relentless thirst. It tasted of life, of a promise whispered in the quiet hum of a new place. The giant humans, initially towering and terrifying, slowly began to shed their monstrous facade. They moved with a strange, deliberate slowness around Asher, their voices soft rumblings. Asher learned the rhythm of their approach, the gentle click of a door, the soft pad of their feet, the quiet offering of a bowl filled with a warm, meaty smell that made his stomach rumble with an entirely new kind of hunger. Anticipation. The fear that had once been a constant companion began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. The sting of the needle was always followed by a comforting touch, the rough texture of a blanket, the reassuring weight of a hand stroking his fur. He learned that these giants, despite their size, are brought not harm, but solace. Lyra, too, experienced this transformation of fear into nascent trust. Her initial instinct was to hiss, to flatten herself against the floor, to show teeth that were too small to truly threaten. But the giants persisted. They never forced, never rushed. They offered small pieces of meat on their fingertips, spoke in soft, cooing sounds, and moved with a patient grace that eventually disarmed her. The soft brush of a clean cloth on her fur, the warmth of a heating pad beneath her, the clean, fresh scent of her bedding. These were the new sensations that slowly eclipsed the harsh memories of hunger and abandonment. The giants were not predators. They were providers, healers. Then came the glass, the transparent barrier that separated them, yet somehow connected them. Asher, still a pup with boundless energy, would press his nose against it, feeling the cool surface, watching Lyra on the other side. Lyra, ever the curious lynx, would stalk the perimeter of her space, her tail twitching, her gaze often fixed on the playful energy of the wolf cub. The humans had built a partition, a necessary separation for two different species, but it became, unintentionally, a bridge. Every evening, without fail, they would return to their familiar spot. Asher the wolf cub, now a gangly adolescent, would lie against the partition, his gray fur pressed to the cool glass. He would emit soft, contented whines deep in his chest, a sound that spoke of comfort, companionship. On the other side, Lyra the lynx, her spotted coat sleek and powerful, would purr contentedly, a rumbling vibration that resonated through the glass. This quiet communion, this nightly ritual of shared space and silent understanding, became a symbol of their unbreakable bond. They didn't understand why, only that the presence of the other brought a profound sense of peace. Hope Nursery flourished around them, a testament to the compassion that nurtured them, proving that love could indeed transcend instinct and species, forging connections in the most unexpected of places. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a strange group of giants arrived. They carried odd, dark objects that hummed and clicked, pointing them at Asher and Lyra. A flicker of old fear, a distant echo of the past stirred in Asher's chest, but the comforting presence of Lyra on the other side of the glass quickly soothed it. He whined, not in fear but in recognition, a soft, almost imperceptible sound of reassurance directed at his friend. Lyra responded with a low, rumbling purr, her amber eyes, now clear and full of trust, fixed on Asher. The giants with the clicking objects were silent, their movements slow and respectful. They watched transfixed as the wolf cub and the lynx kitten, no longer fearful and hurting, performed their nightly ritual, their heads touching the glass, their breaths fogging the surface for just a moment before dissipating. The quiet click of the camera, the hushed murmurs of the crew, all faded into the background. For Asher and Lyra, there was only the familiar comfort of the other, the unspoken understanding that had blossomed in the safety of Hope Nursery. What the humans saw was a deeply moving moment of interspecies bonding, a testament to the power of compassion. What the animals felt was the profound relief of belonging, the sweet triumph of trust over terror. The footage, a silent narrative of two rescued souls finding solace in each other, would soon travel the globe, a viral video that garnered unprecedented support for Hope Nursery, proving that even the most broken spirits, given enough love and care, could heal and teach humanity a profound lesson about connection. They don't have to be enemies. The words, whispered so softly I almost missed them, hung in the sterile air of the observation room, a stark contrast to the low thrum of the ventilation system. Elena, her heart a drum against her ribs, turned from the window. Professor Davies, typically a bastion of scientific detachment, stood beside her, his gaze, like hers, fixed on a small, pale boy, no older than 7, who pointed a finger at the enclosures beyond the reinforced glass. Asher, the wolf pup, all gangly legs and cautious curiosity, nudged a toy mouse, while Lyra, the Bobcat Kitten, a tiny striped whirlwind, stalked it with playful intent. The boy, Leo, an unexpected guest from a local support group for children with autism, wore a beatific smile. His statement, delivered with unwavering conviction, felt less like a comment and more like a profound truth uncovered. For so long, Elena had wrestled with the shadows of her own past, her fears, and the world's cynicism. Each rescue, each rehabilitation, was a battle fought against the ingrained belief that some creatures were simply beyond saving, or that their natures dictated an unchangeable path of aggression. But Leo's words, so simple, so pure, bypassed all her complex anxieties and spoke directly to the core of her unwavering hope. They were a validation of every sleepless night, every tear shed over a lost animal, every triumph when a creature, broken and terrified, finally found solace in a gentle touch. This wasn't just about two young predators learning to coexist. It was about tearing down the invisible walls that separate us all. Hope Nursery wasn't just a place. It was a living, breathing testament to that possibility. Asher the wolf pup remembered the cold. Before, there was only the cold and the sharp, burning ache in his side. A strange, metallic smell clung to the air, and the ground was hard and unyielding. Fear was a constant companion, a tightening in his belly that never truly eased. Then came the giants. They were huge, looming shapes that moved with alarming speed. Their voices were deep rumbles, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp. He had cowered, flattened himself against the rough earth, wishing for the ground to swallow him whole. One giant, with a scent that was both unfamiliar and strangely comforting, had scooped him up. His injured side flared with pain, and he whimpered, a low, guttural sound he barely recognized as his own. He felt the sting of a tiny prick on his leg, a brief, sharp invasion, followed by a sudden wave of warmth and lassitude. He didn't fight. Too weak, too weary. The world blurred and he drifted into a fitful sleep. When he awoke, the biting cold was gone. Instead, he felt the soft, yielding embrace of something warm and fleecy. His tongue, dry and rough, gratefully lapped at the cool water a giant offered. It wasn't a hand, but a shallow, smooth dish held steady. The giants still loomed, but now their rumbles were softer, their movements slower. They brought soft, mushy food that smelled of meat, and he ate, tentatively at first, then, with desperate hunger, the dull ache in his belly slowly subsiding. Lyra, the Bobcat Kitten, knew only the scent of smoke and the searing pain in her paw. Her mother's frantic cries echoed in the chaos, and then silence. She was alone, small, and terrified. The forest, once a haven of rustling leaves and comforting shadows, was now a terrifying inferno, a landscape of fear. She hid a tiny bundle of striped fur until the giants came. Their footsteps were heavy, their voices loud, but they moved with a strange gentleness. One giant, with warm hands that didn't hurt, lifted her, cradling her close. She hissed, a tiny defiant sound, but the giant's hands were steady, its scent a mix of clean soap and something else, something reassuring. The giants had strange tools that made tiny noises, and her paw throbbed with a new kind of pain, a cleansing pain as they worked. She felt another tiny prick, a fleeting sting, and then a soothing coolness spread through her leg. They wrapped her paw in soft white material that smelled like medicine. Later, she was given a warm, thick liquid that tasted faintly of milk, and she purred, a tiny rumbling sound she hadn't known she could make. The giants were still giants, but their touch was no longer a threat. It was a promise. Elena, watching Asher and Lyra interact, saw the boy's words come to life. The natural instinct to fear, to fight, was slowly, painstakingly being unlearned. Trust, a fragile thing, was being built, brick by gentle brick. Professor Davies, his expression uncharacteristically soft, turned to Elena. "He's right, you know," he murmured, his gaze still on Leo, who was now meticulously stacking wooden blocks. "They don't have to be enemies. None of them do." His words, echoing Leo's, were a quiet, seismic shift. For years, Elena had pushed against a scientific community that often saw her work as sentimental, anecdotal. Now, the unshakable Professor Davies, a man of pure data and empirical evidence, was looking at the world through a child's unfiltered wisdom. The implications were immense. Days later, Professor Davies presented his groundbreaking paper, an international symposium, not just on animal behavior, but on interspecies empathy. He cited Elena's meticulous records, her innovative rehabilitation techniques, and, crucially, the observations of children like Leo. His conclusion was unequivocal. Empathy was not solely a human construct, and with dedicated intervention, even the most primal instincts could be reshaped by understanding and trust. The scientific community, initially skeptical, was swayed by Davies's formidable reputation and the compelling evidence. Within months, Hope Nursery received permanent, substantial funding, solidifying its future as a beacon of healing. Elena's journey, once a solitary and arduous path, was now recognized, validated, and embraced. The whispers of a child had transformed everything. If this story touched your heart, comment 1 if you're moved or 0 if you're speechless. Thanks for watching until the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more magical stories. See you next time.